Okay, yeah, I'll tell you what happened. But I want to be clear about something first. I'm not a hero. I've heard that word thrown around a lot in the last week, mostly by people who weren't there and don't understand what actually went down. I'm a guy who made a decision in about 4 seconds and then spent the next several days wondering if it was the stupidest thing he'd ever done in his life. Spoiler, jury's still out on that. I should back up, give you the context, because if you walk into this story in the middle, you'll miss the part that actually matters, which is how I ended up on Helix Prime in the first place, which is, honestly, a whole other story. The short version is, I got discharged from the Terran Republic Medical Corps about 18 months before all this happened. Not dishonorably, nothing like that. I couldn't do it anymore. 3 tour on the Outer Rim, 2 years in the trauma bays on Kepler Station, and somewhere in the middle of all of that, something in me got real quiet and stopped working the way it used to. The doctors called it compassion fatigue with secondary PTSD. I called it being done. So I took my severance, took my discharge papers, and I went looking for something quieter. Helix Prime is not quiet. I should have known that. It's one of the biggest interspecies transit stations in the known galaxy. Something like 40 million beings pass through it every standard month. It's got 12 levels, 1,000 different species, 50 different languages spoken on any given corridor, and a black market economy that the Peace Commission pretends not to know about. But it pays well for freelance medical contractors, and the cost of living on level 4, where the mid-range humans tend to cluster, was manageable. I'd been there about 6 months when the incident happened. I was working shift at the level 9 emergency bay. Not glamorous. Level 9 is technically the diplomatic sector of the station. Embassies, consulates, high-end accommodations for dignitaries and species that require specific environmental conditions. The medical bay on that level mostly handled overdoses of rare chemical substances, the occasional assassination attempt, and a lot of very expensive beings having very expensive emergencies. It paid triple what the lower-level bays paid, so I took the shifts when they were available. The night in question, 3rd cycle, late in the month of the Black Star, I was 37 minutes into a quiet 8-hour shift, which meant nothing was happening, which meant I was sitting at the intake desk drinking something that the vending machine called Earth Blend coffee, and which tasted like someone had described coffee to a machine that had never encountered coffee, and the machine had done its best. The station lights on level 9 are always dimmed to about 40%. Most of the species on that level prefer lower light conditions, which means you get used to the shadows. You stop noticing them. I noticed this one. It came through the corridor door that connected the medical bay to the embassy row, not the public entrance, the restricted access one that was supposed to be sealed from the outside unless you had diplomatic clearance. I heard it open before I saw anything. Just this soft whisper of hydraulics, and then cold air came in, actual cold air, not station recycled atmospheric neutral, but cold, like something that had been kept in darkness for a long time. And then she came through the door. I didn't know who she was at first. How would I? I knew Nocthari existed, everyone knew that. They were one of the oldest spacefaring species in the galaxy, one of the founding members of the Unified Galactic Council, known for being intensely private, intensely powerful, and intensely dangerous to be around if you were on their bad side. I knew they had a royal family. I did not know what the crown princess looked like, and even if I had, I don't think it would have prepared me. She was tall, taller than most humans by about a foot, maybe more. Her skin was the color of deep space, not black, not quite, but that deep, light-absorbing shade that makes you feel like you're looking at something that exists between colors. Her hair was silver. Real silver, not dyed. It moved like liquid when she walked, like each strand had its own weight and momentum. Her eyes, when I finally saw them, and I'll get to when that was, were the color of bioluminescent deep-water organisms, like looking into something that makes its own light. She was wearing what I can only describe as formal diplomatic attire that had been destroyed. Like she'd started the night in an outfit worth more than my entire apartment's contents, and something had happened to it. The fabric was torn along the left side. There was something dark on it, not quite blood as I understood blood, but close. Darker. Thicker. And she was not walking right. She made it through the door and took maybe 6 steps into the bay, and then she stopped. Her hand went to the wall. Her head dropped. I watched her shoulders do this thing, this careful, controlled thing, where they were trying not to shake and failing. I was already moving by then. Training doesn't leave you. It goes quiet sometimes, gets buried under the fatigue and the distance, but it doesn't leave. I was around the desk and across the bay before I'd consciously decided to move. "Hey," I said. I always said that first. Not ma'am or sir or the species-appropriate honorific, just hey, gets through the shock faster. "Hey, I've got you, can you look at me?" She turned her head, slowly, like it cost her something. Her eyes met mine. And here's the thing I didn't expect, the thing that got me right in the center of the chest, even before I knew who she was or what was happening. The thing in her eyes wasn't pain exactly. It was something older than pain. Something that had sat with pain for so long it had learned to wear it like clothing. There was a dignity in it that made me feel like I was witnessing something I wasn't supposed to see. "Human," she said. Her voice was low and musical, and it had this resonance to it that you felt in your teeth. "I require assistance." "You've got it," I said. "Can you walk, or do you need me to?" "I can walk." She could not walk. She made it another 4 steps before her legs decided they were done, and I caught her. Which was, look, she weighed significantly less than I expected, but she was also significantly taller than me, so it was awkward. And for about 3 seconds we were both just doing our best not to end up on the floor. We didn't end up on the floor. I got her to the nearest bay bed, the one I always kept clear because that's just habit, and she sat on it with this careful, deliberate movement, like she was conserving every ounce of whatever she had left. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I'm going to scan you, standard medical scan. Is there any reason I shouldn't?" She looked at me for a long moment. "You don't know who I am." "Number does it matter right now?" Another pause. Something shifted in her expression, something subtle, something I might have missed if I hadn't been watching carefully. Most beings would have already called for diplomatic security the moment I entered. Most beings would have already called their supervisor, I said. "I'll do both of those things in about 90 seconds, but first I need to know what I'm dealing with. Are you injured? What is that on your clothing?" "My blood," she said. There was an incident on the embassy floor." I picked up the scanner. Nocthari biology wasn't in my standard training, but the scanner had universal xenobiology protocols, better than nothing. "An incident," I said. "Do I need to be worried about whatever caused the incident still being in this building?" She considered this. "Probably not." "That's not a no." "No," she said, "it is not." I ran the scan. The scanner gave me about 60% useful data. The rest was outside its parameters for Nocthari-specific biology, but what it did tell me was enough to make my stomach drop. Her blood count was critically low. Now, I didn't know exactly how Nocthari physiology worked in its specifics, but I knew enough xenobiology to know that critically low blood count in any species that has blood is a problem. And I knew that whatever had happened to her on that embassy floor had taken a significant amount of it out of her. I looked at the scan results again, then I looked at her. She was sitting very still, the way prey animals go still, not from calm, but from the knowledge that stillness is the only thing keeping them upright. "How long ago did this happen?" I asked. "Approximately 40 minutes. "And you walked here alone?" I did not want to. She stopped, reorganized whatever she'd been about to say. "There are political complications that made involving station security inadvisable at this time." How bad is it? The situation on the embassy floor. She met my eyes. There are 3 individuals who will not be creating further complications. I absorbed that. Okay, and you got the worst of it before you resolved the situation. Yes. I put the scanner down and sat across from her, on the empty bed facing hers. This is something I learned early in my medical career. Sometimes you need to sit. Not stand over someone with authority and equipment. Just sit. I'm Cole, I said. I'm a medic, ex-military, currently contracted to this bay. I'm going to help you, but I need to know what you need because my scanner can only tell me so much. She looked at me for a long time, long enough that I noticed the way the light in her eyes, that bioluminescent quality, was dimmer than I imagined it should be. Like whatever power source lived behind them was running low. What I need, she said slowly, is blood replacement. Nocthari compatible. The bay's reserves will not have it. It is rarely stocked in human standard facilities. The Nocthari consulate has reserves, but access requires protocols that I currently cannot safely trigger without alerting. Can you accept a compatible substitute? I asked. There are 3 universal xenobiology compounds in this bay that are designed to function as temporary blood replacement in non-human patients. They're not perfect, but They will not work on Nocthari, she said. Our biology is specific. Specific how? We require living blood, not synthesized. The molecular structure of synthesized compounds degrades within minutes in Nocthari bloodstream. It has to do with She paused again, and this time I realized she was actually struggling. Not emotionally, she was fighting to stay conscious. Her hand on the bed beside her had gone very still. Our metabolic process requires the living resonance in organic. She stopped. Her chin dropped. Hey, I said. I was on my feet. Hey, stay with me, eyes open. Her eyes opened. That bioluminescent quality flickered. Cole, she said. My name, from her voice, sounded like something being recognized from a great distance. Yeah, I'm here. I am going to lose consciousness in approximately. No, I said. No, you're not okay, not on my watch. And that's when I did it. I'm a medic, I understand blood. I understand compatibility. Not perfectly, not with species I'd never treated before, but I understood the fundamentals of cross-species transfusion better than most, because my 3rd tour had involved a field station on the outer rim where you sometimes didn't have the right supplies and you made decisions. I had O-negative human blood. Human blood is, here's the thing that most people don't know. Human blood has been studied extensively by xenobiologists because of how remarkably adaptable it is. There's a paper, one of those papers that circulates in certain medical communities, that suggests human blood has a higher rate of compatible resonance with non-human biology than any other known species blood. Not because of any mystical quality, just molecular adaptability. We evolved in an environment that required our biology to be flexible, and it shows up even in our blood. I'd read that paper about 4 years earlier. I'd filed it away in the part of my brain that holds information you're never sure you'll need. I was very sure I needed it now. I'm going to give you blood, I said. Mine. It's not ideal. It might not work. But it's the only living organic blood I have access to right now, and you need something in the next 10 minutes or we're going to have a very bad outcome. Do I have your consent? She looked at me. You would, her voice was strange. Not weak, even now barely conscious, her voice wasn't weak, but it was changed. You understand what you are offering, what the implications. I understand you're dying. Do I have your consent? The longest 3 seconds of my life. Then, yes. I moved fast after that. I always moved fast once the decision was made. You can't second guess in the middle, you can second guess after when everyone's stable and you've got time. In the middle, you just work. I drew 1 unit. Then, reading her vitals, watching the scanner's rough data, making judgment calls I had no business making but making anyway, I drew a second. Then I ran the line and I watched her vitals for the reaction. Here's what I expected. Rejection. Some level of cellular incompatibility. The usual response when you push something into a system that wasn't designed for it. Inflammation, oxygen drop, possible anaphylactic cascade. Here's what actually happened. Nothing. Or not nothing, the opposite of nothing. Her vitals stabilized so fast that I checked the scanner 3 times to make sure it wasn't malfunctioning. The blood count numbers climbed. Slowly at first, then with more confidence, like something waking up. The bioluminescent quality in her eyes, and I watched it because I couldn't look away, deepened. Brightened. Went from a dim flicker to something steady and real. She drew a long breath. The kind of breath you take when something that has been wrong for a while finally goes right. I sat back and pressed a gauze pad to the inside of my elbow. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she said very quietly, "That should not have worked." "Yeah," I said, "I know. Human blood there is no precedent for." "I'm aware." She looked at me. There was something in the look that I couldn't entirely read, not then. I was still too focused on her vitals, on the scan data, on making sure the stabilization held. But there was something in it. Something that felt like the beginning of a question she wasn't sure she wanted the answer to. "Your name," she said. "Cole." "That's right." "I am Seraphine," she said, "of House Valithara, Crown Princess of the Nocthari Dominion." A pause. "I owe you a debt that I do not yet have words for." "You owe me nothing," I said. "I'm a medic. This is what I do." She shook her head slowly. "No, you are wrong about that. What you did tonight, what you gave, it is not nothing. Among my people, blood freely given is the oldest covenant there is." She met my eyes. "You are bound to me now, Cole Marin, and I am bound to you." I didn't know what that meant yet. I should have asked. I came on shift at 6 in the morning, standard time. Cole was still there, which wasn't unusual. He did long shifts sometimes, especially when things were busy. What was unusual was that he looked like someone who'd had a very interesting night and wasn't entirely sure how he felt about it. And sitting on Bay Bed 1 was a Nocthari woman who was, "Look, I've worked level 9 for 11 years. I've seen dignitaries. I've seen ambassadors. I've seen a Velithari high priest who radiates an aura of such intense psychic presence that 3 of our nurses had to take stress leave afterward. I thought I'd developed a sort of professional immunity to the extraordinary. I was not immune to this woman. She was sitting perfectly upright on the bay bed. I don't mean good posture. I mean the kind of stillness that suggests the concept of slouching has never occurred to her and never will. She was wearing a station-issue blanket around her shoulders because whatever she'd been wearing before was, apparently, unsalvageable. Underneath it, she was wearing, I think it was part of the outfit, some kind of high-collared garment in a fabric I didn't recognize. Her silver hair was down. Her eyes were open, and the light in them, I'm a medical professional. I don't use words like luminous about patients, but I'm telling you the light in her eyes was luminous. She was watching Cole. Not in a threatening way. More in the way you watch something you're still figuring out. Like a puzzle you've picked up and can't quite put down. Cole looked up when I came in. He gave me this expression, this very specific expression that said, "I will explain everything, but right now please just be normal," and said, "Morning, Dessa. We had an intake around 2300. Patient stable. I'll brief you." "Sure," I said, very professional, very calm. I put my bag down behind the desk and pulled up the overnight log. The log had one entry, timestamp 2327. It said, "Patient Nocthari, female, approximate age unknown, blood loss critical, treated, stable, further assessment pending." Under treatment administered, Cole had written, "Experimental whole blood transfusion, cross-species protocol. Human O negative, Patient responded positively. I stared at that for a long time. Then I walked over to Cole, who was doing something very focused with a piece of equipment, and I said, very quietly, "Cole, did you give a Nocthari crown princess your blood?" He kept doing the thing with the equipment. "How did you know she was the crown princess?" "Because I have eyes, and she looks like someone who was born to rule planets." "Fair," he put the equipment down. "Yes, I did." "Cole." "She was dying de ça." "Cole, I understand that, but—" "She needed living blood. I had living blood. It worked." He finally looked at me. "I'd do it again." I looked over at the woman on the bay bed. She was still watching him. Something in her expression made me feel like I was intruding on something private. "She hasn't left?" I asked. "No." "Did she say she was going to leave?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "She said she was going to stay until she was certain I was stable." "You did the transfusion. She's the patient." "I know. So why is she worried about whether you're stable?" He picked up the equipment again. "That," he said, "is something I am very much trying to figure out." I glanced back at the princess. Her eyes were still on Cole. There was something in the set of her expression, not soft exactly, but not hard either. Something in between. Something that looked a lot like proprietary concern. Like someone who had decided, overnight, that a particular thing was hers to watch over, and was settling into that decision with the easy confidence of someone who doesn't expect to be argued with. Over 20 years of nursing, I've seen a lot of patients develop attachments to the people who saved them. It's normal. It's human, or the equivalent of human, across species. You nearly die and someone brings you back. There's a bond there. It's physiological as much as emotional. But I've never seen it look quite like that. Whatever had happened in this bay overnight, it wasn't a simple transfusion. I could feel that in the air, that same cold quality that the atmospheric sensors had probably logged. That sense of something old and significant having taken place in a small, fluorescent-lit room. I went and made the Earth Blend coffee that tasted nothing like coffee, and I thought about what to put in the incident report. And I watched the crown princess of the Nocthari Dominion watch Cole Marin like he was the most important thing she'd seen in 600 years. Which, as it turned out, was more or less accurate. Section 2.2, Personal Testimony of Cole Marin, continued recorded day 7 post-incident. She didn't leave. That was the thing I couldn't get my head around for the first several hours. I kept expecting her to stand up, thank me formally, and go back to whatever diplomatic business occupied a crown princess on a major transit station. That's what made sense. That's what the logical sequence of events was. She didn't stand up. She sat on bay bed one and watched me go about my shift, and when I asked, carefully, professionally, whether she felt ready to return to the embassy quarter, she looked at me with those luminous eyes and said, "I am assessing your condition." "My condition is fine," I said. "You gave 2 units of blood within a 20-minute window. Your iron levels are—" "I know what my iron levels are. I'm a medic." "You are a medic who treated himself as a resource rather than a patient," she said. "This is a pattern I recognize. I would like to observe you for several more hours." I stared at her. "You would like to observe me?" "Yes." "You're the patient." I was the patient. My vitals are now within acceptable parameters. Yours are borderline. She paused. "Sit down, Cole Marin." There was something in the way she said it. Not commanding exactly, or maybe commanding, but not the hard kind. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep and certain that it doesn't need volume. The kind that makes you sit down before you've decided to sit down. I sat down. She watched me for a moment with an expression that was almost approving. "Good. I want it noted," I said, "that I'm only sitting because I was going to sit anyway." "Noted," she said. She sounded like she didn't believe me. I looked at her. She looked at me. In the background, Dessa was making coffee and aggressively not looking at either of us. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "You may attempt it." I wasn't sure if that was a yes or a conditional yes, but I went ahead. "What you said last night about being bound, what did that mean?" Something moved behind her eyes. That deep-water quality went deeper for a moment, like I'd asked a question that had more than one answer, and she was deciding which one to give me. "Nokthari blood covenant," she said. "It is not widely discussed outside our people. The giving of blood, voluntary, conscious, in an act of preservation, creates a resonance between the giver and receiver. The blood itself, your blood, specifically, became part of what sustains me now. In the most literal biological sense, part of you is now," she paused, "inside me." The way she said it was so clinically precise that it took me a second to process that she wasn't being clinical about it at all. She was telling me something that was, by the look on her face, significant in a way that didn't have a casual register. "Okay," I said, "and that creates an obligation." "It creates a connection," she said. "Among my people, blood freely given is not forgotten. It is not a metaphor. The one who gives becomes protected, claimed in a sense, though that word has implications I would clarify before you react to it." "Please clarify them." "Claimed not as property," she said, "claimed as significant. As someone who is not to be harmed, not to be lost, not to be allowed to wander unprotected in a galaxy that frequently harms and loses and fails to protect people who deserve better." She was looking at me very directly. "You saved my life. My blood, your blood now, will not forget that." I let that sit for a moment. "And if I said I just want to go home at the end of my shift?" I asked. Her expression did something subtle. Not hurt, more like the question had weight that she was deciding how to carry. "You would go," she said. "I would not stop you. The covenant is not a cage, but I would." She chose the next word carefully. "Follow at a respectful distance. Until I was confident that you were safe." That sounds like a cage at a respectful distance. "It sounds like gratitude that does not know how to be small," she said quietly. And something in her voice, just the faintest edge of something that wasn't quite an apology but was in the neighborhood, made me understand that she wasn't entirely comfortable with this either. That this was as new for her as it was for me. Maybe newer. I exhaled slowly, looked at the coffee that Dessa had placed beside me at some point when I wasn't paying attention. "Okay," I said, "can I at least finish my shift first?" The faintest curve of something appeared at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, close. The concept of a smile, translated through 600 years of dignity. "We are writing to flag an ongoing situation that has come to the attention of this office, and which we believe requires immediate administrative guidance. As you are aware, HRH Princess Seraphine Valithara of the Nokthari Dominion arrived at Helix Prime on the 29th of last month as part of an unofficial diplomatic transit. Her itinerary was not publicly disclosed, per standard Nokthari protocol. On the night of the third cycle, an incident occurred on Embassy Row Level 9, the details of which are currently under separate investigation by the Galactic Peace Commission and are not the subject of this communication. What is the subject of this communication is the following. As of this morning, day 2 post-incident, HRH Princess Seraphine has not returned to the Nokthari Embassy suite. She is, instead, currently located in Emergency Medical Bay 7, Level 9. She has been there for approximately 31 hours. She appears to have no intention of leaving. The individual whose presence appears to be the determining factor in this arrangement is one Cole Maren, a human medic contracted to Bay 7, who treated the princess on the night of the incident. 3 members of the Nokthari diplomatic staff have come to Bay 7 to escort the princess back to the embassy. All 3 were sent away. One of them was sent away with considerably more velocity than is standard for diplomatic interactions, and has filed a formal complaint with the embassy staff physician, who has confirmed that while no lasting physical harm was done, the individual is understandably shaken. We are not entirely certain what the appropriate administrative response is to the crown princess of an allied galactic power has taken up residence in a medical bay and won't leave because she is watching a human medic do paperwork. But we felt it warranted your awareness. Stop CCing the liaison office on everything. This is exactly how diplomatic incidents start. Cole Marin is a credentialed contractor in good standing. Bay 7 is a functional medical facility. As far as the administrative record is concerned, the princess is receiving extended post-treatment monitoring, which is a perfectly legitimate medical designation. Do not attempt to remove her. Do not let the embassy staff attempt to remove her. If the Nokthari diplomatic team has a concern, they can send a formal inquiry through proper channels, which will take approximately 2 to 3 standard days to process, at which point we will all have had some time to think. Nobody is doing anything dramatic. Corvell. P.S. I am choosing to interpret "sent away with considerably more velocity" as a misunderstanding that has been resolved. If someone files additional paperwork on this, I will be in my office, not answering my communicator. Section 3.3, Personal Testimony of Cole Marin, continued. Day 2 was when the Nokthari diplomatic security team showed up. There were 5 of them, full armor Nokthari formal combat regalia, which is this incredible dark material that seems to absorb light and occasionally gives it back in strange patterns. They were tall, all of them. They were built like architecture. They move the way people move when they know, without doubt, that they are the most dangerous thing in any room they enter. They came into Bay 7 at 900, and they arranged themselves in a formation that I recognized from my military training as a retrieval escort. Seraphine was sitting in the chair she'd migrated to sometime around midnight. She'd moved from the bay bed to a chair near the window, which had a view of the station's upper ring. All those ships docked and undocked in the perpetual motion of a place that never fully sleeps. She'd been sitting there for hours, watching the ships, sometimes watching me. When the security team came in, she didn't move. Their leader, or at least the one in front, said something in Nokthari. I don't speak Nokthari, but I've been around enough tense conversations to know what one sounds like in any language. And this one had the specific texture of someone very carefully telling someone else that it was time to go, and trying to make the word time feel like now, without technically saying now. Seraphine responded. Her voice was quiet, perfectly level, the kind of quiet that fills a room more completely than shouting would. Whatever she said, it wasn't compliance. The security lead tried again, slightly different phrasing. Seraphine's response was briefer this time. 2 words, maybe 3. The effect was immediate. The security team shifted their collective weight in a way that didn't look like movement but was, clearly, a recalibration of position. Cole, she said. She didn't look away from the security team when she said it. Yeah, I said, from behind my desk, which I had not moved away from because I am not without some basic self-preservation instinct. Do you want me to leave? I thought about that very carefully. I didn't say that, I said. I asked what you want. I looked at the security team. 5 Nokthari soldiers in full formal regalia, watching this exchange with expressions that ranged from professionally neutral to quietly baffled. What I want, I said, is for everyone to calm down and for nobody to get hurt in my medical bay, and for someone to maybe explain to me what's actually going on here. The political part. The part you haven't told me yet. A pause, long enough to mean something. Then Seraphine turned her head and looked at me with those deep-water eyes. The incident on Embassy Row, she said. The 3 individuals I mentioned. Yeah, they were not random. They were sent by a faction within the Unified Galactic Council, a faction that has been attempting for some time to destabilize the Nokthari Dominion by targeting the line of succession. She said this the way you say something you've known for a long time and stopped feeling shocked by. I survived, but surviving this kind of thing has consequences. There will be questions. There will be an investigation. There will be those who believe that my survival is politically inconvenient and who will try again. And you're here, I said, in my medical bay, instead of your embassy. I am here, she said, because the embassy suite was where they found me. My own protocols were compromised. I do not know yet which of my staff. She stopped. I know that whoever gave them access to my location is still in close proximity to the embassy suite. The security team hadn't moved, but their energy had shifted, something quieter, something that smelled like the moment before something very significant happened. You're safe here, I said slowly. She met my eyes. I am safe here. Because they don't know you're here. Because they don't know I'm here, she confirmed. And because, she paused, there is another reason, but that one is more complicated. Tell me the complicated one. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she turned back to the security team and said something else in Nokthari. The leader responded shorter this time, almost a single syllable. Seraphine nodded once and the team withdrew. Not fully, they positioned themselves in the corridor outside, which I could see through the bay's transparent door panels. They weren't leaving, but they weren't in the bay anymore. The Covenant, she said, once they were gone. Blood freely given creates a resonance, as I told you, but there is a second aspect that I did not fully explain last night. Okay. The blood of the giver, your blood, Cole, carries a signature. A biological signature that is now threaded into my own. My body recognizes it. She was choosing words carefully, I could tell, trying to find the ones that would translate accurately across the distance between her experience and mine. What this means in practical terms is that the people who wish to harm me, who have calibrated their methods to my biology, who know my specific responses to specific stimuli, will find me significantly harder to affect than before. She looked at her own hand. I don't fully understand it yet. Neither does our biology department, and they've had 6 centuries to study the Covenant phenomenon. But the data is consistent. A Nokthari who has received Covenant blood from a being of exceptional resonance shows altered response patterns to external threats. Exceptional resonance, I repeated. Your blood specifically, she met my eyes. It should not have worked at all. Human biology and Nokthari biology are not compatible in any catalog I have ever read, and yet, she gestured very slightly at herself, alive, steady, luminous. The fact that it worked suggests that your specific biology has a quality that our instruments don't currently measure. I sat with that for a while. So I accidentally gave you some kind of protective upgrade, I said. That is a very human way of describing it, she said. But broadly, yes. And now you don't want to leave because you are now the only being in this galaxy whose presence my body recognizes as, she paused. The pause was different from the others. Less about word selection, more about something happening in her expression that she wasn't entirely comfortable with. Safe, she said finally. Your presence, your blood resonance. Being near you is the only thing that currently functions as anchor in a body that was critically destabilized last night and is still recalibrating. I looked at her. She looked back at me, and for the first time since she'd walked through that door, I saw something in her face that wasn't control or dignity or centuries-deep composure. It was something much more basic than any of that. She was scared, not of the people trying to kill her. She'd handled that already. She was scared of this, of the dependency, of the need, of the fact that she'd woken up this morning and found that her 500-year-old self-sufficiency had, overnight, developed a very specific hole in it shaped exactly like a human medic she'd known for less than a day. Okay, I said. She blinked. Okay. Stay, I said, as long as you need. This is a medical facility. You are not fully recovered yet. That's the official designation. I looked at my desk, at the paperwork Dessa had conveniently not yet filed. I'll handle the administrative side. She was quiet for a moment. Colmarin, she said, you are a very strange human. I'm really not, I said. I'm very boring, ask anyone. I will not be asking anyone, she said. Something in her voice had shifted. That almost smile was back, the one that lived in the corner of her mouth and didn't quite come all the way out. I am staying here. The investigation into the Embassy Row incident, formally designated Operation Midnight Accord, moved faster than most diplomatic investigations, for the simple reason that the evidence was thorough and the perpetrators were no longer in a position to complicate things. 3 individuals, identified as contracted operatives with connections to the Meridian Bloc, the political faction most aggressively opposed to Nokthari influence on the Galactic Council, had infiltrated Embassy Row using compromised access credentials. Their target had been Her Royal Highness Seraphine Valithara. Their methodology had been what the analysts described as specifically calibrated to Nokthari royal physiology, which is a careful way of saying they'd come prepared. They had underestimated the target. What the princess had done to them was, I've reviewed the forensic analysis, and I'm going to describe it as swift, conclusive, and entirely within the established legal framework of Nokthari's sovereign right of self-defense. And I'm going to leave it at that. The more pressing investigative question was the one the princess had raised. Who in her own staff had provided the operatives with access to her specific location and schedule? The embassy had been sealed within 2 hours of the incident, and the Peace Commission had begun its internal audit. The answer came on day 9. A junior diplomatic attaché, young, ambitious, and apparently susceptible to a very large sum of credits and a promise of safe relocation, had passed the princess's schedule to an intermediary 3 days before the incident. By day 12, the attaché was in Peace Commission custody. The intermediary was in process of being located. The Meridian Bloc's leadership was issuing official statements of denial with the specific aggressive vigor that suggests the denials are true about the leadership, but false about the organization's margins. Standard procedure, long, ugly, necessary. What none of this addressed was the question that had become increasingly relevant to this investigation. What was the crown princess of the Nokthari Dominion doing in a medical bay on level 9, and when was she leaving? I went to find out for myself. Section 4.2, Personal Field Notes, Analyst Preth Morvan, Day 14 post-incident. I arrived at Base 7 at 800. I had credentials, which got me past the Nokthari security detail in the corridor, 5 soldiers, rotating in pairs, who had been stationed there since Day 2, and showed every sign of being prepared to stay indefinitely. One of them scanned my credentials with the specific careful attention of someone who finds most credentials insufficient and is deciding how to feel about these. She decided they were sufficient, barely. Inside the bay, the situation was not what the administrative reports had led me to expect. I'd read those reports carefully. Nokthari royal guest remains in medical bay, status, extended observation. The language was professionally neutral and told me very little, so I'd built my own mental image, tense standoff, uncomfortable logistics, 2 parties stuck in an arrangement neither of them fully wanted. What I actually found was Colmarin, human medic, 37 minutes into what appeared to be a perfectly normal shift. He was updating patient intake records on his workstation. He had a coffee beside him. He was humming something. I couldn't identify the song, but it was quiet and not unpleasant. And seated in a chair near the far window, the one that looked out at the station's upper ring, Princess Seraphine Valithara of the Nokthari Dominion, with a data pad in her hands, reading what appeared to be a medical research document. She was wearing, and I want to be precise about this, because it's relevant to the overall picture, not diplomatic regalia, not formal attire. Something that looked like station-issue loungewear that had been significantly improved by whoever had altered it to fit her. Silver hair loose, no formal markers of her position visible anywhere. She looked, for lack of a better descriptor, comfortable. As I entered, Marin looked up. The princess didn't. She turned a page on her data pad. "You're the analyst," Marin said, "not a question." He had the look of someone who's been expecting an investigative interview and had already decided how they were going to approach it. "Preth Morven," I confirmed. "Galactic Peace Commission, I have some questions." "Yeah," he gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit down." As I sat, the princess turned another page. "Analyst Morven," she said without looking up, "I have reviewed your file. 11 years with the Peace Commission. 17 commendations for field analysis, 2 incidents of exceeding your investigative mandate in ways that turned out to be correct, which is why you still have a position." She finally looked up. Her eyes met mine, and I will say, for the record, that they are every bit as remarkable as the witness accounts described. "I will cooperate with your investigation as completely as the Nokthari diplomatic protocols allow, which is very nearly completely." "Thank you, Your Highness," I said. "I appreciate that." "I also have some questions for you," she said. "I expected that," I said. She nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to her data pad. I turned to Marin. "How are you doing?" He blinked. "That's your first question." "It's a warm-up question," I said, "but also a genuine one. You gave 2 units of blood to a patient and then continued a full shift. That's medically inadvisable." "She told me that too," he said, "about 6 times. And I slept 8 hours, had iron supplements for 3 days, and I'm fine." He paused. "She made me eat. I want that noted, in case it's relevant. For 2 days, she was very invested in making sure I was eating enough." I glanced at the princess. She appeared to be deeply absorbed in her data pad. "Did you find that?" "Weird," Marin said. "A little. Also kind of nice. I don't know how to explain that without it sounding more complicated than it is." "How would you describe the current situation?" I asked. He thought about it. Actually thought about it, not a diplomatic pause but genuine consideration. "She needed somewhere safe," he said. "This is safe. She's not ready to go back to the embassy until the investigation closes and she knows her staff is clean. That makes sense. I've been in situations where you don't know who's compromised and you need a neutral position." "I get that. And the other reasons?" He looked at me steadily. "What other reasons?" "The Covenant," I said. "I've done my research, Mr. Marin. Blood covenant among the Nokthari isn't a minor thing. I've read 3 academic papers on it in the last 12 days. He was quiet for a moment. "Then you know what she told me, the resonance thing." "I know the general principle. What I'm curious about is your personal experience of it." I glanced between them. "Yours and hers." It was the princess who answered, without looking up from her data pad. "It is manageable," she said. "The first 3 days were difficult. There is an adjustment period as the Covenant blood integrates. It is disorienting to suddenly have a compass point where previously there was none." She turned a page. "But manageable. The intensity decreases as the integration stabilizes." "Compass point," I repeated. "That is the closest translation," she said. "In Nokthari the word is Velshin. It means," she paused, apparently looking for the right words, "the thing that tells you where you are in relation to what matters." The Bey was very quiet for a moment. Marin was looking at his coffee. His expression had the quality of someone who has heard something said plainly that they'd previously only understood sideways, and is recalibrating. "And your experience, Mr. Marin?" I asked. He looked up. "I don't have a blood covenant." "She got the blood, I just gave it." Actually, the princess said, and now she did put down her data pad and turned to look at him directly, that is not entirely accurate. The covenant works in both directions. It is simply less dramatic in the giver than the receiver. She met his eyes. You haven't noticed anything. A pause. I sleep better here, he said. When I'm in the bay or nearby, I thought it was just I've been sleeping well lately. I thought it was the regular schedule. It is not the regular schedule, she said gently. He looked at her, she looked at him. And in the space of that exchange, something passed between them that was not appropriate for me to witness, and which I recorded in my field notes as two individuals becoming aware of something they had both been trying not to be aware of. I excused myself for coffee. Day 15 is when things got interesting in a different direction. It started with Seraphine's mother. I did not know the Nocthari Queen was going to show up in my medical bay. I feel like that's the kind of thing someone should warn a person about. Nobody warned me. She arrived at 1400 on day 15, through the main entrance this time, not the restricted access door, with an escort of 12 soldiers and 2 individuals in robes who I later found out were Nocthari court advisors. She was taller than Seraphine by at least 3 inches, which I hadn't thought was possible. Her hair was black, not silver, actual black, with a depth to it like the event horizon of a very small star. Her eyes were gold, not gold like a color, gold like something that produces light. She was the most impressive person I had ever been in a room with, and I say that as someone who had, at this point, spent 15 days in close proximity to her daughter. She came into the bay, and she looked at Seraphine, and Seraphine stood up, and they looked at each other for a long moment in a way that clearly had an entire conversation in it, none of which I could hear, and then the Queen turned and looked at me. I didn't back up, I'm proud of that. I didn't back up, I held my position, and I looked back, because I am a medic and this is my bay, and also because the training that doesn't leave you also includes something about holding your ground when things with gold eyes evaluate you. She said something in Nocthari, long, formal in structure. I could tell that much from the rhythm of it. Seraphine translated, not looking at me. She says, "You are the human who saved my daughter's life." "Yes, Your Majesty," I said. More Nocthari. Seraphine translated, "She wants to know why." "Because she needed saving, and I was there." Seraphine translated that. The Queen was quiet for a moment, looking at me with those gold eyes. Then she said something shorter. Seraphine said, "She says that is either the simplest answer or the most profound one, and she cannot yet determine which." "I've been getting a lot of that," I said. Seraphine almost smiled. Actually almost, more than the corner of the mouth thing, more of her face participated this time. The Queen said something else. Her tone changed, less formal, more direct. Seraphine hesitated before translating, just a fraction of a second. She says, "The covenant is real. I can feel it in her from here. That has never happened before, that a queen could feel the covenant in her daughter from across a room. That has implications." "What kind of implications?" I asked. The Queen spoke. Seraphine translated, "The kind that require conversation, not translation. She requests that you join her for a formal audience, tomorrow, in the embassy suite." A pause. "The security concerns have been sufficiently resolved to allow return." "The embassy suite," I said, "not here." "Not here," Seraphine confirmed. I looked at the Queen, she looked at me. Her expression was measured, analytical. The way Seraphine looked at me sometimes, but older, more layers. "Will Seraphine be there?" I asked. The Queen looked slightly, not amused, that's too light a word. Interested, maybe. Like the question had confirmed something she was already thinking. She said something brief. Seraphine said, "She will be wherever you are." Which was, I absorbed that. "Then yeah," I said, "I'll be there." The Queen looked at me for one more moment. Then she said something that Seraphine didn't translate immediately. There was a pause, and then Seraphine said quietly. She said, "Good. You are less foolish than most humans. That is rare and worth preserving." "Should I say thank you?" I asked. "I would," said Seraphine. "Thank you, Your Majesty," I said. The Queen made a gesture that I'm pretty sure was the Nokthari equivalent of "You're welcome," and took her leave with her 12-soldier escort and her 2 robed advisors, and the bay felt significantly different afterward. That quality of gravity in the air dissipated, and I realized I'd been holding myself very upright for the entire conversation, and now I could stop. I let out a long breath. Seraphine sat back down in her chair. "Your mother is terrifying," I said. "Yes," she said. She picked up her data pad. "She is." "You're less terrifying." She glanced at me. "I am exactly as terrifying. I simply choose in your presence not to exercise it." I considered that. "Is that," I started, "is that a compliment?" "It is a fact," she said. "Make of it what you will." She was already reading again. I made some coffee. I thought about it. I decided it was probably a compliment. Section 5.2, Personal Testimony of Cole Marin, continued day 16. The formal audience was the next day, at 1000. I wore the nicest clothes I owned, which were not very nice, and Dessas spent 20 minutes the previous evening trying to help me do something better with my hair, at the end of which she gave up and said, "You look like a medic. Just be yourself." If she's kept you around this long, she likes what she sees. I told her that was an extremely loaded thing to say. She told me that she was aware. The embassy suite on level 9 was, look, I'd been on level 9 for 6 months. I'd worked in the medical bay on that level, and I had a vague sense that the diplomatic accommodations were nicer than the rest of the station. I had underprepared myself for what nicer meant in the context of Nokthari diplomatic design. The suite occupied the entire eastern quadrant of level 9, which is a lot of space on a station the size of Helix Prime. It had been reconfigured from standard station architecture into something that felt like being inside a piece of night sky. The ceilings were high and dark. The walls had this quality of absorbing light and releasing it slowly, and the temperature was about 8 degrees cooler than the rest of the station. There were no harsh surfaces. Everything was rounded, curved, designed for beings who moved through darkness with ease and found harsh angles unnecessary. The security team that had been living in my corridor for 2 weeks was back in their proper positions, looking, I thought, slightly relieved to be in their own space again. I was shown to an antechamber and then to the main reception room, which was large and dim, and occupied by the Queen, 3 court advisors, 2 individuals I didn't recognize in elaborate formal attire, and Seraphine. Seraphine had changed. This is worth noting. In the 15 days she'd spent in the bay, she'd worn station issue adjusted to fit, and her hair had been loose, and she'd looked, there's no other word for it, approachable. Not unregal, but approachable in a way that made the space between us feel navigable. Today she was in formal Nokthari court attire, the fabric was the same light-absorbing material as the armor, but fluid and layered, and it moved like something alive. Her silver hair was up in something architectural. There were markings on her face, formal markings, applied in bioluminescent pigment, that traced the lines of her cheekbones and her temples in patterns that echoed the light in her eyes. She looked like what she was, royalty, 6 centuries of it. I stood there for approximately 3 seconds trying to find the version of myself that belonged in this room. Then she looked at me, and the look was, it was the same look. Whatever change the clothing and the setting had made, the look was the same one she'd been giving me for 15 days across a medical bay. That specific quality of attention, the one that felt like being seen by something that didn't miss details. Something in me settled. I crossed the room and gave what I hoped was an appropriate bow and said, "Your Majesty." to the Queen and Your Highness to Seraphine, because I'd been practicing on the walk over. The Queen's gold eyes were doing that interested thing again. She said something to one of her advisors, who wrote it down, which made me wonder what exactly she'd said, and whether I was going to hear about it later. Then the formal audience began. I'm not going to record the entire thing here. It went on for 3 hours, and significant portions of it were conducted in Nakhthari with Seraphine translating, and a lot of it was political or legal in nature. The treaty implications of the blood covenant, the formal documentation of what I had done and what it meant under Nakhthari law, the Peace Commission's investigation, and how the Nakhthari Dominion was choosing to respond to the Meridian Bloc's apparent involvement. What I will record is the part that happened at the end. When the formal business was concluded and the advisors and additional courtiers had been dismissed, the Queen looked at me directly and said, in Galactic Standard, which she apparently spoke perfectly and had simply chosen not to use for the first 3 hours, I owe you a debt, Cole Marin. You don't, I said. I treated a patient who needed help, that's not. I know what you will say, she said. My daughter has already told me. It's just what I do. Anyone would have. Her gold eyes were steady. No, not anyone. You might be surprised how few beings in this galaxy would offer their own blood to a stranger of an incompatible species, knowing nothing about who she was, asking nothing in return. I didn't say anything. The covenant is real, she said. It is old and it is real, and it has consequences that I want to discuss with you plainly. She glanced at Seraphine briefly, and something passed between them, the kind of look that goes fast and deep in the way that only happens between people who have known each other for a very long time. Then she looked back at me. The blood of the giver does not simply stabilize the receiver. Over time, it becomes integrated. It becomes part of what the receiver cannot easily be without. Seraphine mentioned something like that, I said. She mentioned the medical aspect, the Queen said. There is also a practical one. The integration, if it proceeds, if it is not disrupted by separation, will deepen. Both parties. You will find, if you spend the next several months in proximity, that the separation becomes increasingly difficult. Not impossible. Not an addiction, not a compulsion, but significant. I absorbed that. And if I leave, I said, go back to my regular life, level 4. The integration would not proceed to deeper levels, the Queen said. What is already present would remain a resonance, a quality of the blood, but the active bonding would cease. She was choosing words with real care. My daughter would be well. She has survived worse disorientations than a covenant that doesn't fully complete. A pause. She would be well. The way she said it. I looked at Seraphine. She was looking at a point somewhere near the window. Her expression was controlled. More controlled than I'd seen it in 15 days. The kind of control you apply when you're trying to make your face say nothing. What does Seraphine want? I asked. The Queen didn't answer. She looked at her daughter. Seraphine turned, met my eyes. I want, she said, to not want anything that you are not prepared to offer. Her voice was even, very even. The covenant was not your choice. You gave blood to save a life, not to enter a 600-year-old binding. Whatever you decide, whatever is right for you, is what should happen. That's not what I asked, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Cole Marin, she said, you were discharged from service because something in you stopped working the way it used to. You came to this station to find something quieter. She held my gaze. I am not quiet. My life is not quiet. The Nakhthari Dominion is not quiet, and whatever you are to me, whatever this bond has made of you, will not be quiet. That's still not what I asked, I said. The longest pause. I want you to stay, she said, simple, no inflection, just the truth of it offered plain, not because of the covenant, not because my blood has made a compass point out of you, but because she stopped, restarted. Because I have spent 6 centuries in rooms full of people and I have not been seen in the way you see me since I was young enough to not know the difference. She looked at me steadily. You see me, Cole Marin, not the princess, not the Dominion's heir, me. A very slight pause. I would like to keep being seen. Part 6, The Decision. Section 6.1, Personal Testimony of Cole Marin, continued day 17. I went back to level 4 that night. Seraphine didn't follow. I'd asked her not to, and she'd given me the distance, the night, the space to think. Whatever the Covenant was doing to her, she set it aside and gave me the night. My apartment on level 4 was exactly what it always was. Small, practical. The view was of another section of the station's infrastructure, pipes, maintenance walkways, the machinery that kept 40 million beings alive and comfortable. Not the upper ring, not the ships. I sat on my bed and I thought. I thought about what I'd come to Helix Prime for, the quiet, the simpler pace. The distance from everything that had made the last several years of my life feel like too much. I thought about 15 days in a medical bay with someone who read xenobiology research papers in station-issue loungewear, and made me eat, and noticed when my iron levels were low and talked about blood resonance, with the same matter-of-fact directness that she talked about everything else, like she'd decided early on that I could handle the truth and was going to treat me accordingly. I thought about what Dessa had said somewhere around day 10. She looks at you like you're the most interesting thing she's seen in centuries. And then, after a pause, Cole, she's about 6 centuries old. Think about what that means. I thought about quiet. Whether quiet was what I'd actually needed, or whether quiet was what I'd reached for because I couldn't find something else. Whether the thing in me that had gone quiet after the last tour had been damaged, or just waiting for something with enough weight to wake it up. Not everything, just enough for a while. Nocthari security personnel at entrance conduct scan. Credentials verified. Door opens. Individual enters. Door closes. Section 6.3. Personal testimony of nurse practitioner de Savome, day 20 post-incident. He didn't come in for his shift on day 17. Which, look, I'd been expecting it. Not necessarily that specific day, but I'd been watching the situation develop for 2.5 weeks, and I knew what direction it was going. I have worked level 9 for 11 years. I have watched a lot of things develop. He sent a message, professional, appropriate, requesting a leave of absence for a period of time yet to be determined, citing personal circumstances. The message was well written, respectful, covered all the administrative bases. You could tell he'd thought about it. You could also tell, if you knew him, that he'd written it quickly, like he'd made the decision and didn't want to slow down and second-guess it. I approved the leave request, filed the paperwork, and then I sat at the intake desk with my terrible vending machine coffee and thought about it. Cole Marin came to Helix Prime looking for something quieter than his last several years. He found, instead, a critically injured Nocthari princess who walked through a restricted access door at 2300 and changed the vector of his life in about 40 minutes. I don't know if that's what he needed. I don't think he knows yet either. What I do know is that the thing in him that had gone quiet, the thing that made him take the discharge and come looking for simpler, that thing had been getting louder since day 1. You could see it if you were paying attention. The way he woke up for that shift, the way the part of him that was a medic and had always been a medic stopped being something he was performing and started being something he was again. The way, by day 10, he'd stopped looking like someone who'd come to rest and started looking like someone who'd found a reason to move. I think Helix Prime was always going to be temporary. I think he knew that. I think whatever he was waiting to figure out, he figured it out. I hope it's good. I hope it's whatever he needed. I hope the crown princess of the Nocthari Dominion turns out to be, among her many notable qualities, someone who makes him feel like the world is worth engaging with again. Because he's worth that, for all that he'd argue otherwise. The analyst wants a final statement, for the record, for the archive. I'm going to try to give him one. Here's what I know now that I didn't know 6 weeks ago. Nocthari blood covenant is real. It's not metaphor, it's not spiritual language dressed up as biology. It's a documented biological phenomenon that 700 years of Nocthari scientists have studied and still don't fully understand. When I gave Seraphine my blood, I started something. Not deliberately, not knowingly, but I started it and it's proceeding, and I've made the decision to let it proceed. What that means practically, I am, as of day 37, formally recognized under Nocthari law as a covenant-bound associate of the royal house of Valithara. This is an unprecedented legal classification because I'm human, and there is no precedent for a human in this position. The Nocthari legal scholars apparently find this fascinating and have been publishing papers about it. Good for them. What it means personally, I live in the embassy quarter now. I do actually work, I'm still a medic. I've been appointed to the Nocthari Dominion's medical staff in an advisory capacity that I'm still figuring out the scope of. It turns out that whatever quality my blood has that made the transfusion work is interesting enough to the Nocthari xenobiologists that they want to study it, and I've agreed to cooperate with that process. And in exchange they're teaching me things about xenobiology that my entire medical training never touched. It's interesting, more interesting than I expected anything to be for a while. Seraphine she's exactly what she was in the Bay. She's precise and she's honest and she doesn't do anything small, and she has the particular kind of directness that comes from spending 6 centuries deciding that pretending to be less than you are is a waste of everyone's time. She reads, constantly. She has opinions about everything and she shares them. She's 600 years old and there are things she finds genuinely new, and she is not embarrassed about that. She still makes sure I eat. I've stopped arguing about it. We haven't figured out everything. There's a lot we haven't figured out. The full scope of the covenant, what it means for a human and a Nocthari, what the long term looks like when the lifespans involved are wildly mismatched. I'm 37. She's been alive for 6 centuries and has centuries more ahead. That's a thing we're going to have to sit with and think about and probably have some difficult conversations about. And we're not there yet. What we are is present in the same space, finding out. The Queen in our second formal audience looked at me with those gold eyes and said, "You gave my daughter something rare. You gave her blood, which is significant. But you also gave her your attention, full, unguarded attention, the kind that does not calculate what it is safe to feel. That is rarer than the blood, Cole Marin." I didn't know what to say to that. I told her that. She said, "You don't need to say anything, just continue." That seemed like good advice. I'm continuing. Section 7.2, Closing Field Notes. Analyst Preth Morvan, Day 62 post-incident. I am filing this archive complete. The investigation into the Embassy Row incident is closed. The Peace Commission has formally recommended enhanced security protocols for all diplomatic personnel transiting Helix Prime. The Meridian Block has been formally censured by the Galactic Council, which is less satisfying than it sounds, but more than many expected. The individual who compromised Princess Seraphine's schedule has been sentenced under interspecies conspiracy law. The station has returned to normal operations. What is not normal, and what I don't have an appropriate category for in any investigative framework I have ever used, is the situation in the embassy quarter. I went back for my final interview on day 60. Cole Marin met me in the antechamber. He knows the layout of the embassy suite now, moves through it with the ease of someone who has stopped being a visitor. He looked different from day 7 when I'd first spoken to him. The quiet was still there, but it wasn't the heavy kind anymore. The kind you put on when you're tired of things. It was the other kind. The kind that happens when things are actually okay. He poured me something that was not vending machine coffee. "How's the investigation wrapping up?" he asked. "Cleanly," I said, "all things considered." He nodded, looked at his cup. "Is there anything you want on record?" I asked. "Final thoughts?" Things you'd say to someone reading this archive in 100 years. He thought about it. Yeah, he said. Tell them that the training the medic gets about cross-species compatibility in emergency situations is inadequate. Tell them that the xenobiology research on blood resonance needs about 40 more years of funding and serious attention. Tell them that O-negative blood is worth studying. He paused. Tell them that sometimes the galaxy hands you something completely unexpected in the last 37 minutes of a quiet shift, and the most important thing is whether you move fast enough to catch it. I wrote that down. And he said quieter, tell them it's worth it. Whatever it looks like from the outside, whatever category it doesn't fit, it's worth it. I was closing my notes when Seraphine came through the inner door. She was in court attire. She'd had a diplomatic session earlier in the day from what I understood. The formal markings on her face, the silver hair up, the whole architecture of her, the 6 centuries of it. She stopped when she saw me. Analyst Morven, you're completing the archive. Yes, Your Highness. She nodded. Then she looked at Cole. Just looked at him, the way she'd been looking at him since day one, that quality of attention that didn't miss anything. You ate, she asked. Yes, he said. The xenobiology team has the results from this morning's session. I'll look at them this afternoon. She nodded again. Then she crossed the room unhurriedly and sat in the chair near the window, not the one in the medical bay, but one that served the same function. Same position relative to him, same angle on the view. She picked up a data pad, started reading. He went back to his coffee. I looked between them for a moment. This specific arrangement, this man and this woman 6 centuries apart and one blood covenant in, finding out what ordinary life looked like between 2 people who should not have been possible. I closed my notebook. There are 412 known sentient species in the charted galaxy. The records I maintain document their interactions, their conflicts, their treaties, their misunderstandings. Most of those interactions follow patterns I can anticipate. Most of them land, eventually, in categories I recognize. This one doesn't land anywhere I've seen before. I'm not sure there's a category for a human medic who gives blood to a dying princess, and then spends the rest of his life figuring out what that means. I'm not sure the galaxy has a word for whatever Cole Marin and Seraphine Valithara are in the process of becoming.